So from a business model perspective, there's lots of components. There's aspects of a business model that just should exist. Overall, they're pretty simple. What is the value proposition? What are the market segments that you're targeting? What are the value chain? And what is the structure of that value chain? Who's involved in it? What is your position within that value network? Are you at the early stage from a standpoint of manufacturing? Are you at the end stage from a standpoint of actually delivering the product or service to the consumer? Or are you somewhere in the middle? How do you generate revenue? And how do you generate margins? And those are two very different things. There are companies out there, we all know, that generate tremendous amounts of revenue, and their margins are very tiny, 1%, 0.5% or less. But they make it up because the revenue is so extreme. You have other companies out there that have exceptionally high margins, tremendously high margins, not very large revenue. Think about luxury goods resellers. Take a look at an average consumer that goes out and buys a luxury bag or a nice suit or an expensive watch. Well, I can go buy a watch from Movado, or I can go buy a watch from Swatch. These are beautiful watches. They're made by large manufacturing groups. They're going through a very, very sophisticated distribution channel, and they're made in the tens of thousands. Those watches are sold anywhere between $39, $49 up to probably $1,000. And they're sold in the thousands through retailers that you see in the mall, through retailers that are online, and also through big box sellers like Walmart or Costco or others. You think, wow, that's interesting. Someone like Swatch and also Movado, which is much higher end, they both sell through similar distribution channels. They do tremendous volume, so they have very, very high revenues, but their margins are incredibly small. The goal is saturate the market, get as many people to buy as possible. Take a look at other types of products that are similar, that are called watches. Very often they're then called timepieces, where you have watches that are handmade, or they're made in a very, very subtle way, where it's a lot of on-hand or craftsman work and craftsman design, very low on the manufacturing side. It might take months to make a particular watch, if not longer. And the watches sell for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. You think about IWC, Patek Philippe. Many of these watches, they'll sell for $100,000 or $50,000 for a watch. Totally different business model. Their margins are very large, but their overall revenues are relatively small because they don't sell a lot of pieces, right? Think about Mercedes-Benz and think about Ford. If you based success on the total number of vehicles sold, Ford kills them year in and year out. If you base it on margins, well, it's a slightly different story. Ford has some products that are incredibly high margins, like their SUVs. They have other products, like their low-end cars, that are very low margins, but they're looking to get adoption within a particular marketplace. Mercedes, much different story. Very high margins on virtually every vehicle they sell. Much lower volume. So all of these things have to be taken into consideration. You cannot choose your business model because it seemed like it made sense because you saw a competitor doing it. You have to figure out where are you within that particular value network. The competitive strategy plays into that, and what stage of development is the company. So I'm going to flip through a couple of these slides, and we'll dive into some examples, and I'm hoping you guys have lots of questions at that point. So the value proposition, which is really number one here, is really a description of the customer problem, the solution that addresses that problem, and the value of this solution from the customer's perspective. The customer's perspective is very important here, right? If I am buying, let's say, an Apple product, which I see a lot of here, well, there's a lot of things there that I, as a consumer, might be attracted to. I love the design of it, the size of it, the feel of it, the way it operates, right? If, for example, you're buying a desktop computer and you chose to pick out a Dell, or you chose to pick out another type of manufacturer, not like Apple, maybe you're buying it for entirely different reasons than that Apple user. So think about what is it that the customer perceives as value. Is the customer looking for low cost, or are they looking for, speed? Are they looking for something? And you need to make sure that your value proposition offers that. From a market segmentation perspective, it's choosing your audience. And we could talk about this entirely throughout this class, but I'm going to keep it short. You have to know who that ultimate end user is. Who is that person that's going to write that check? recognizing that different market segments have different needs. If you're selling, we'll use the example I did a moment ago, if you're selling to that high-end watch buyer who's buying essentially a timepiece that's going to be passed down for generations, that's a different type of buyer, a different type of a marketing approach than if you're selling a Swatch watch, which borders on a disposable watch. If it lasts 5 years, it's fantastic. By then, you probably have bought 3 or 4 more watches. Same thing for computers and cars and many other things. Additionally, value chain structure and position in the value network are critical to this, and they're part of that initial slide I shared. So what is the firm's position in the value chain? What are the activities within the value chain, and how the firm will capture part of the value that it creates within that chain? Because where you fit within that chain and how much of it you own is really, really important to know. If you're Netflix, think about where are you in the value chain? Excellent. So Yost asked if I could describe the value chain. So think about the entire cycle. And I'll use Netflix as an example because I mentioned it. So what does Netflix do, essentially? Their distribution. To who? The end user. They are at the far end, whichever end you want to call the far end. They're at the far end of the cycle. Right? There's not much after that. Right? They're distributing a movie, something entertaining to us. If you think about that entire value chain or that entire cycle, it goes all the way back, way back, to somebody maybe a year ago or 20 years ago that had an idea for a picture, an idea for a movie or a film, who then, as they moved through that value chain, maybe they found a screenwriter, they ultimately perhaps found a studio. That studio ultimately made a decision whether they were going to fund it or not, just like a venture capitalist. Movies are just like starting companies. Idea all the way through to the business plan, to the funding. That venture capitalist, or in the case of a movie, it's the studio that says, we love it, we want it, the story's outstanding. We want to buy this story, we're going to put this much against it. They then build the team, right? So they find who's going to be the lead, who's going to be the second, who's going to be the third, who's going to be the action character, who's going to be the romantic, where's it going to be filmed? All of these aspects are just like a business. They got to find the CEO, the CFO, the CTO. They have to figure out where are we going to locate the company? Where's the best place for it to be? And then at that point, they start working on it and toiling away and filming it. And filming could take weeks, months, or even years. Then ultimately, it's distributed. Now, it might be distributed directly into theaters, or if it doesn't get great reviews in the early days of distribution, it might actually go directly to DVD. And that's when Netflix jumps in. So if you think about it, that's a long cycle, and I probably skipped 30 parts. So where do you fit within that distribution channel is absolutely critical for you to understand how you think about that and where you actually will capitalize and make money. Netflix also had the big challenge where they were facing a major competitor at that time when they first came to market. Does anybody even remember who that competitor was? Right? Blockbuster got their butt kicked by Netflix. What happened? Well, what happened was 2 major things. Number one, technology changed. DVDs came out, VCRs were going away, right? So videotapes made perfect sense when you went in a Blockbuster. It was kind of big, kind of bulky thing, didn't even think about shipping it, easy to break, gets crushed, doesn't work so well, the tape gets pulled out, whatever. Blockbuster had a great model. They were at the end of the cycle, to us the consumer, they put little stores everywhere, and they made it easy. But all of a sudden, the DVD world came out, where you were able to get super high definition, quality picture, motion pictures on a DVD that is as flat as an envelope. Netflix said, hey, why are we building stores for these things? People already know the movie they want, or they could use this new technology called the internet and figure out what movie they want. We'll just mail it to them. The other big challenge that Blockbuster had was the whole process of limited supply and demand on that supply. So they penalized you if you didn't return the video on time because they were losing revenue. If you didn't get it, put it in that little tiny box by 7 a.m. or 10 a.m. the next morning, you got charged a fee. Why? Because somebody else wanted their 1 of 3 copies of that movie. They couldn't have an unlimited supply. Whereas the ability to reproduce and print DVDs, virtually unlimited. Everybody in this room could order a DVD today of a hot movie that just came out. It could be at your house tomorrow. There's no distribution issue. The ability to reproduce that DVD, drop it in an envelope, and mail it to you is effortless, completely automated. So what you have here is this convergence where there was an opportunity. There was technological change, whether it be DVDs or internet or a combination of both, that allowed Netflix to completely crush Blockbuster. And then Netflix then changed themselves, didn't they? They recognized that our ability to capture more bandwidth, the ability for us to actually download a movie was increasing in many parts of the United States. Not everywhere, not everywhere. But as our ability, especially in large cities, increased to download movies, now all of a sudden it changed to we don't even have to ship it to you anymore. All you have to do is download it. It streams to you. And then they created a whole series of other distribution channels. Now you can get Netflix on your Roku. You can get Netflix in all of these other areas. So if you think about it, when the guy that started Netflix started off, it was a very simple model. People like movies, and they're willing to pay for them so they could watch them at home. DVDs are the new thing, and we've developed a complex shipping method and mechanism and a model of warehousing DVDs that we can get it to people overnight, and they can keep it for a day, a week. We don't really care because we're just going to keep shipping more. It was so simple. Like, the business model could not have been easier. But what they did is they continued to change and morph their business model as the technology changed, and they've continued to stay far ahead of the curve. What is the latest thing that Netflix is now doing? They're producing movies. How crazy is that? Like, can you imagine if you were the CEO of Netflix and you said to the VCs when you went in to talk to them a decade ago, well, here's the thing, I got a business idea. What we're going to do is we're going to basically kick Blockbuster's ass. Right? We're going to distribute these things on DVDs, and then we're going to start to do downloadable. And then, by the way, we're going to become a movie production studio. Their head would explode, and they would just say, listen, you have no idea what you're doing, and you don't understand how complex the market is. That's why earlier I said simplicity. When you launch your business, keep it simple. Show that that model is easy to understand, and then from there you continue to expand. Who would have thought Netflix is now producing some of the best shows out there? Orange is the New Black is one of the top shows out there, produced by Netflix. What are some of the other ones? House of Cards. So you think about it, like, that's mind-boggling. What is the difference between Netflix and Blockbuster? Leadership. The ability to change, the ability to see around the next curve and actually change the business model of the company in order to adapt.